I'll be your wife. I'll do whatever you ask. Please save me from the rails. Elias Crow had never liked railways. Not the normal ones that snaked through city streets or connected distant towns. He didn't even like the old frontier rail lines back on Earth. But on Caldera... 9. The rails were different. They weren't made of iron alone. They hummed with magnetic energy running across endless deserts of red dust and jagged rock. They carried goods, people, and information at impossible speeds, and they didn't forgive mistakes. If the system flagged you as unregistered, it didn't ask questions. You disappeared. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but quietly, as if you had never existed. Elias had always stayed away from those lines. He preferred the soft wind of open plains, the smell of ionized air, and the slow hum of his cargo drones. Today, though, the rails called him in a way he didn't like. He was checking the feed from his outpost, his small station perched on a ridge overlooking the main rail hub, when a frantic signal blinked on his console. A distress beacon. Weak, erratic, and human. Someone was near the edge of the iron grid, and the system had flagged them. Elias frowned. No one ever came out of the wilds by mistake. If they did, it meant one of two things, a glitch or desperation. He packed his things quickly, grabbing the essentials, a water filter, a solar-powered drone, and a sat map that could show terrain changes up to 50 kilometers away. His hover scooter was old, but reliable. As he mounted it and kicked the engine, the horizon burned gold and red under the twin suns of Caldera. Dust spiraled up like smoke from an invisible fire. When he reached the signal's source, he saw her. A young woman crouched beside a tangle of rails that glowed faintly in the twilight. Her clothes were dusty, torn at the edges, and she was shaking, not with cold, but with fear. "Please help me," she whispered, almost to herself. Elias stopped a few meters away. He wasn't sure why, but he didn't rush toward her. There was something about the desperation in her voice that made him cautious. "You're near the grid," he said. His voice was calm. "Do you know what that means?" She looked up at him wide-eyed. "I think they'll erase me." "I don't know why. I didn't do anything wrong. Please, I'll do whatever you ask. Please save me from the rails." Elias blinked. Her words were strange, almost theatrical, but he understood the fear. The rail system didn't forgive ignorance or mistakes. He had seen families and travelers vanish quietly because of it, but he had never seen anyone beg like this before. He shook his head. "I'm not in the habit of taking people under my wing because they're scared." He paused. "But I also don't like watching people disappear." She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "Please, I don't care what it takes." Elias raised a hand. "Stop. Listen to me. I don't save people because they promise me things. I save them if they trust me to help them. Right now I need the truth." The woman's shoulders sagged. She was trembling, but she nodded. "My name is Mara Vale. I made a mistake. I think the system thinks I'm unregistered, but I wasn't. I just don't know how to fix it." There was something in her eyes, something that spoke of intelligence, not recklessness. "Not a liar. You're lucky the signal reached me. If you had waited much longer..." He didn't finish the sentence. "The rails could erase someone before anyone noticed." Mara flinched. "I don't have time for mistakes. They'll come for me soon. Please." He dismounted his scooter and gestured for her to stand. "You stay close to me, but don't expect me to follow orders. We'll walk, and you tell me everything, from the beginning." Mara nodded, and together they moved away from the rails. Each step was careful. The magnetic lines hummed faintly, almost like a living thing, and dust swirled around their boots. "Why are you out here alone?" Elias asked, trying to break the tension. Mara hesitated. I was working on the rail system. I thought I could fix a glitch, but then it turned on me. It labeled me as unstable. I don't even know who can see me anymore. I can't contact anyone without risking immediate deletion." Elias frowned. He had heard stories of programmers being trapped this way, but he had never met one. "So you're saying this wasn't an accident?" "No." Her voice was steady now. "I was flagged. I don't know why. Maybe someone wanted me gone. Maybe the system just decided I was a risk." They walked in silence for a while. The sun dipped lower, and the dust around them glowed faintly orange. Elias noticed Mara watching the horizon constantly, her eyes darting toward the rail lines that ran like silver snakes across the desert. "You've been scared for a long time," Elias said finally. "I can see it in the way you move." Mara swallowed. "Yes, and now I don't know who to trust." Elias nodded. We'll take it slow, one step at a time. First, we get you out of the grid's reach. Then, we see about fixing your problem. Mara's shoulders relaxed slightly. She had expected someone to dismiss her plea entirely. Instead, this stranger was offering something more valuable than a promise. He was offering guidance, choice, and patience. As they walked, Elias scanned the terrain. There were old outposts and signal scramblers hidden in the rocks, perfect for avoiding the rails. He knew them well, and he knew which paths were safe, even if they were longer. You know your way? Mara asked, hope flickering in her voice. I know enough, Elias replied. Enough to keep you alive. The night fell quickly on Caldera. 9. The twin moons rose, casting long shadows across the desert. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of ionized minerals. Mara shivered, not from cold, but from the realization that she was truly far from safety. Elias stopped at a narrow canyon where an old maintenance tunnel ran beneath the rails. We'll rest here for a while, he said, safe from the sensors at least. You need to tell me everything about how you got flagged. No gaps, no hiding. Mara nodded and leaned against the cool rock. I was testing a new algorithm. It was supposed to predict maintenance needs, reroute traffic efficiently, but something went wrong. The system thought I was a threat. I tried to shut it down, but it locked me out. Then I ran. Good, Elias said. Honesty is the first step. The rest we'll figure out. You're not alone yet. For the first time in hours, Mara allowed herself to relax. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with a strange sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't disappear into the rails quietly. They spent the night in the tunnel. Elias kept watch, not out of distrust, but because the rails didn't sleep. Even in darkness, the faint hum of their energy reminded him that danger was always near. Mara watched him work with the equipment she barely understood, feeling both helpless and fascinated. By dawn, she was calmer, and Elias was ready to move again. We need to reach the next safe point, he said. It's a small settlement off-grid, called Haven Spur. If anyone can help with your identity problem, it's there. Mara nodded. I'll follow you. I trust you. Elias glanced at her. Trust was rare in these parts and harder to earn than water. Good. Then stay close, keep quiet, and don't do anything reckless. One step at a time, Mara. That's how we survive. And with that, they stepped back into the dust and sun, moving along the edge of the iron rails, each of them aware that every second mattered. The grid was patient, but relentless. And somewhere ahead, the future waited, strange, uncertain, and maybe kind. The sun was higher now, and Caldera. 9's twin suns beat down mercilessly on the desert. Dust rose around Elias and Mara as they moved along the hidden paths that skirted the iron rails. Elias guided Mara carefully, avoiding the main tracks and the surveillance nodes that hummed faintly in the distance. The desert felt endless, like it had no edges, no borders, just an ocean of red sand under a sky that burned gold in daylight and turned purple at night. Mara walked silently beside Elias, carrying only a small sat map and her personal data pad. She kept glancing at the rails, her face tight with tension. Every hum of magnetic energy made her heart skip. She had spent months near these lines, learning their systems, designing parts of the algorithms that now hunted her. And yet, seeing them from this distance, knowing how easily they could erase her existence, filled her with fear she had never imagined. Elias noticed her glances but didn't comment. He had learned long ago that fear was not always solved with words. Sometimes it needed patience, a steady presence. He simply guided them, scanning the terrain, checking the drones, and watching for anomalies. After a few hours, they reached a small oasis, hidden in a rocky depression fed by a slow trickle of water from underground springs. It was one of the few places on Caldera, 9, where travelers could rest safely without being detected by the rail system. Elias led Mara to the shade of a jagged cliff and let her sit while he unpacked supplies. Here, he said, handing her a water pouch. Drink slowly, we're not in a hurry. Mara took the water, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you, she said softly. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come. Elias shrugged. You would have found a way. People always do. I just happened to be here first. Mara looked at him closely. You're calm, even though the rails could erase me at any moment. How do you stay calm? Elias smiled faintly. I've seen enough of Caldera. 9 to know that panic doesn't help. The rails are patient, yes. But the desert isn't. You have to move with your head, not your heart. Otherwise you'll get lost, or worse, make a mistake you can't undo. Mara nodded, letting his words sink in. She had relied too much on her knowledge of the system and not enough on caution. That was what had gotten her here, stranded, hunted, and terrified. After resting, Elias unrolled a portable data board and showed Mara the next leg of their journey. Haven Spur isn't far, but we need to avoid the main corridors. They're the easiest to monitor, and the system checks every person who moves through them. If we go off-grid, we might reach the settlement undetected. Mara leaned closer. I can help, she said. I know the system, its paths, its weak points. I can read the signal patterns, predict where they'll look next. We could move faster, safer. Elias studied her carefully. He had heard promises like that before. People often overestimated their abilities under stress. But Mara's hands were steady, and her eyes were clear. She wasn't lying. Fine, he said. But one rule. No sudden moves. We move together. You lead only when I agree. Mara nodded, a mix of relief and pride in her eyes. For the first time, she felt useful, not just a liability. They moved on. The desert stretched endlessly around them. Dust clouds shimmered under the suns, forming illusions of mirages, hiding valleys and rocks. Mara led the way cautiously, pointing out areas where the system's sensors would struggle to detect them. Elias followed, guiding the drone to map the terrain and keep watch. As they walked, Mara started to open up. I didn't always work with the rails, she admitted. I studied data systems in the old cities, but then I wanted something different. The frontier appealed to me. The vast space, the freedom. That's why I took the job here. I thought I could make a difference, but I never thought it could turn against me. Elias nodded. Freedom always comes with risk. Some people call it adventure. Others call it danger. Here, on Caldera...
Mine, it's both.
Mara smiled faintly. I suppose that's true. But I didn't expect to be hunted by the very system I helped create. They walked in silence for a while, letting the desert noise fill the gaps. The wind whistled softly through narrow canyons. Dust particles sparkled like tiny stars in the sunlight. The two travelers seemed small against the endless expanse, yet their presence alone mattered. They were alive, defying the grid that sought to erase one of them. After several hours, they stopped again near a jagged ridge that overlooked a valley below. Mara pulled out her datapad and pointed to a series of faint lines on the screen. See here? These are the sensor sweeps. They repeat every hour. If we move now, we can cross this valley before the system scans it again. Good observation? We move quickly but carefully. Stay low and follow my signals. Don't step out of line. Mara felt a thrill of cautious excitement. For the first time, she wasn't running blindly. She was using her knowledge, her skills, her mind. She wasn't just a frightened traveler. She was a problem solver. As they crossed the valley, a soft hum rose from the distant rails. Mara froze. It's scanning, she whispered. Elias gestured for her to keep moving. They moved like shadows, sliding between rocks and low hills, avoiding the paths that the system could detect. The sun dipped lower, and long shadows stretched across the valley. Mara's pulse raced, but she didn't panic. She had Elias beside her, guiding her, and for the first time she felt that maybe escape was possible. Once they reached the other side, they paused to catch their breath. Elias scanned the horizon. We're clear for now, he said. Haven Spur is still a day's travel from here, but we've bought ourselves some time. Mara smiled, relief washing over her. Thank you, she said. I don't know what I would have done without you. Elias looked at her, a shadow of a smile on his face. You'll survive. I just help you avoid the system's mistakes. That's all. They continued walking as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of crimson and purple. The temperature dropped slightly and the wind carried the scent of distant minerals. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Mara found herself noticing details she had ignored before. The way dust clung to rocks, the shimmer of distant dunes, the soft hum of the distant rails. By nightfall, they reached a small plateau that overlooked a safe path leading toward Haven Spur. Elias set up a temporary shelter using his drone and a foldable solar shield. Mara watched and impressed by the simple efficiency of his preparations. You make it look easy, she said. Elias shook his head. Experience and luck. Mara laughed softly. For the first time since the rails had started chasing her, she felt a spark of hope. The desert was still dangerous, the system still a threat, but with Elias's guidance, she could see a way forward. As they settled in for the night, Mara opened her datapad and began reviewing her past work. She traced the algorithm she had designed, looking for clues about why she had been flagged. Elias watched her silently, respecting her focus. The night was quiet, except for the soft hum of distant rails and the occasional whisper of wind. "Do you ever wonder," Mara said suddenly, "if the rails are alive? Not in a real sense, of course. But sometimes it feels like they can think, decide who stays and who disappears." Elias chuckled softly. "People like to imagine machines have feelings when they can't control them, but in a way maybe you're right. They follow rules, yes, but they can act in ways no one predicted. That's why we have to be smarter than the system." Mara nodded, feeling a strange comfort in his words. For the first time in days, she felt like she wasn't alone, not just in the desert, but in facing the system that had betrayed her. 9. Elias and Mara sat quietly, sharing the warmth of the small shelter. They didn't speak much, but there was understanding between them. One day they would reach Haven Spur, and Mara would reclaim her identity. But for now, it was enough to survive the desert, the rails, and their fears together. The journey was far from over, but they had taken the first steps towards safety. And in a world where the rails erased those who made mistakes, survival was the greatest victory of all. The first light of dawn spilled across the horizon, washing the desert in soft orange and purple. Elias and Mara had traveled most of the night, guided by the faint glow of distant dunes and the hidden paths Elias knew so well. Their journey had been slow, careful, and full of silent observation. Every step brought them closer to Haven Spur, the floating settlement rumored to exist beyond the main grids, a place where the rails could not easily erase those who entered. Haven Spur was not large. From a distance, it looked like a cluster of metallic domes suspended above the desert by anti-gravity supports. Small docking bays jutted from the edges, each designed to receive cargo ships, freight drones, and the occasional traveler. The settlement pulsed with quiet activity, soft lights reflecting off the metal surfaces, giving it a warm glow despite the harsh environment around it. "Is it real?" Mara whispered, awed. She had heard stories of such places, but seeing it with her own eyes made it something tangible, something she could hope for. Elias nodded. "It's real enough. And right now, it's our best option. Once we're inside, we can start thinking about fixing your problem." They approached cautiously, sticking to the shadows of nearby rock formations. The rails hummed faintly in the distance, but here, the settlement's own shielding and its off-grid position created a zone the system could not easily penetrate. Elias activated a small scanner on his wrist, checking for surveillance sweeps. "We're clear," he said. "But once we dock, we play by their rules. No sudden moves, no tricks." Mara nodded, feeling both relief and anxiety. This was her chance, but also a moment where one mistake could undo everything. They entered Haven Spur through a narrow access tunnel. The interior smelled faintly of recycled air, warm metal, and something sweet. Perhaps hydroponic plants growing inside small glass domes. A few residents noticed them, but life here was quiet, careful. People moved with purpose, eyes often scanning devices or holographic maps. It was a settlement of thinkers, engineers, and wanderers who had chosen to exist outside the usual chains of the rail system. "Follow me," Elias whispered, leading Mara toward a small administrative hub. A single attendant, a woman with silver hair and calm eyes, glanced at them. Elias spoke in low tones, explaining Mara's situation. The attendant's brow furrowed slightly. "She's flagged?" she asked. "Yes," Elias said. "Mistakenly, I believe. I'm bringing her here so she can restore her identity and be safe."
The woman studied Mara closely.
"The system rarely makes mistakes, but it does happen. You'll need to explain everything. Your past, your work, your intentions." Mara swallowed hard. "I will. I promise." The attendant nodded and led them into a small chamber. Inside, holographic panels floated around the room, displaying data streams, codes, and the faint outlines of networks. Mara stepped forward hesitantly. This was her world, her work, but now it felt strange, almost alien. "Sit," the attendant instructed. "We will review your files."
Then we decide how to proceed. You need to be honest.
"Nothing hidden. The system may have flagged you, but we can only help if you are completely transparent." Mara nodded, taking a deep breath. She opened her datapad and began explaining everything. Her design work on the rail algorithms, the glitches she had discovered, the attempt to shut down the system when it started targeting her, and the fear that had driven her to flee. Elias watched silently. He did not interrupt, but he stayed close, ready to provide reassurance if needed. Hours passed as the attendant examined every detail. Mara's hands trembled occasionally, but she did not stop speaking. She realized that honesty, her own clear reasoning, and her willingness to take responsibility were the only things that could save her. Finally, the attendant nodded. You were indeed flagged in error. The system interpreted your actions as unstable, but you were attempting to prevent a larger problem. You have acted responsibly, even if it caused suspicion. Mara exhaled, relief washing over her. So, I'm safe? For now, the woman replied, but you must understand that the system is not easily fooled again. You will need legal standing, verified identity. That is where the tricky part begins. Mara glanced at Elias, worried. Legal standing, what does that mean? Elias explained quietly. Having Spur operates under its own frontier laws. Some old regulations allow certain forms of partnership to establish identity. Marriage, for instance, is recognized by the settlement as a legal and binding relationship. But it's not just about signing papers. It's a mutual agreement, and both parties must consent freely. Mara's eyes widened. You mean they might require me to marry? Not require, Elias corrected gently. It could be one way to reclaim identity quickly, but it's only effective if both of you agree freely. It's a legal tool, not a personal demand. Mara thought about it. The Rails had already taken so much from her. Her freedom, her security, her certainty. The idea of using marriage as a tool felt strange, even uncomfortable. I don't know if I can do that, she admitted. You don't have to, Elias said. There are other options. But you must act quickly. The system may still attempt to correct its error in its own way. Mara nodded slowly, realizing that even in Havenspur, choices had consequences. She couldn't just rely on someone else's protection. She had to take responsibility, use her knowledge, and navigate the laws of this strange settlement. Over the next few days, Mara worked closely with the settlement's administrators. She rebuilt portions of her personal records, explained her work in detail, and learned about the subtle ways the system could override human decisions. Elias stayed with her, helping where he could, not as a protector, but as a companion and guide. One evening, as they rested after a long day of data review, Mara asked, Elias, why are you helping me so much? You don't have to. You could leave, go back to your own life? Elias looked at the desert beyond the settlement's protective dome. Because someone helped me once when I was in trouble. And because I believe in fairness, you're not guilty of anything except curiosity and trying to do the right thing. I can't ignore that. Mara smiled faintly. I don't know what I would do without you. Not just surviving, but understanding. Everything feels less frightening with you here. Elias shrugged. Don't make me sound heroic. I just know how to walk beside someone in a difficult place. That's all. As night fell, Mara realized the meaning of the word promise. She had offered Elias her pledge of obedience and desperation, but now she understood that true promises were about honesty, choice, and partnership, not fear or submission. The next day, the settlement presented her with a choice. She could attempt to establish her identity through legal partnership, a recognized form in Haven Spur, or she could continue independently, taking the longer, more complex route, risking another error from the system. Mara paused, thinking about the Rails, the desert, and her own journey. She thought about Elias, who had never asked her to obey him, never demanded anything from her. The thought of relying on fear to guide decisions felt wrong. I want to do it my way, she said finally. I want my identity restored, but not through fear or shortcuts. I'll do what's necessary, honestly, even if it takes longer. The administrators nodded. Then you must navigate the legal process carefully. We will help, but you must act decisively and transparently. Elias smiled faintly. That's the right choice. You'll keep your freedom and your dignity. Mara realized that the Rails had almost taken everything from her, but now she was learning how to reclaim it with her own hands. And Elias was beside her, not as a savior, but as someone who walked with her, offering guidance and support. That night, under the dome of Haven Spur, they watched the twin moons rise over the desert. The settlement glowed softly, a beacon of safety and possibility. Mara felt a strange mixture of relief and determination. The journey wasn't over, but she had taken control of her fate. She had learned the meaning of a promise, not as a desperate plea, but as a commitment grounded in choice, trust, and respect. The Rails hummed faintly in the distance, a reminder of the challenges still ahead. But Mara and Elias knew that together they could face the future. Not with fear, not with submission, but with courage, intelligence, and honesty. and in the quiet, glowing light of Haven Spur, they realized that survival wasn't the only victory. They had discovered trust, partnership, and the freedom to choose their own path. The morning sun rose slowly over Haven Spur, spilling light across the floating domes in the desert below. Caldera. 9 was awake again, but within the settlement there was a calm energy. Travelers moved quietly, engineers worked carefully, and Mara Vale felt a mixture of relief and determination. Today she would take the final steps to reclaim her identity. Elias stood beside her, adjusting a small navigation device on his wrist. "Ready?" he asked. Mara took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be. I've learned a lot since the rails chased me, Elias. About fear, about trust, and about choice. I'm ready to face this on my own terms." He nodded. "Good. You won't be alone, but you'll be in charge." Together they approached the administrative chamber of Haven Spur. The attendant who had first welcomed Mara greeted her with a gentle smile. "We are prepared to start the verification process," she said. "It will take time, patience, and complete honesty. Are you prepared?" Mara straightened her shoulders. "Yes. I will do whatever is required, openly and honestly." The attendant led Mara to a series of terminals, each one displaying complex data streams and legal frameworks. Mara began entering her personal information, confirming her work, and explaining every action she had taken. Each line of code she had written, each decision she had made, was scrutinized carefully by the settlement's systems. Elias watched silently, offering reassurance with small gestures, an encouraging nod, a steady hand near hers, and a quiet presence. Mara realized how much his calmness had helped her over the past days. He had never demanded anything from her. He had only walked beside her, guiding and trusting her judgment. Hours passed, but Mara remained focused. The verification process was thorough. Each step brought her closer to reclaiming her identity, but also reminded her of the fragility of her existence. One wrong entry, one overlooked detail, and the system could flag her again. But she didn't falter. She had learned resilience, patience, and careful thinking during her journey through the desert and the hidden paths. Finally, after what felt like endless minutes, the terminal displayed a confirmation. Mara Vale was verified. Her identity was restored, recognized officially by Haven Spur, and recorded within the settlement's independent system. The rails, with their distant hums, could no longer erase her. Mara exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. She had survived not by hiding, not by running, and not by bargaining in desperation. She had survived by acting wisely, honestly, and deliberately. The attendant smiled warmly. "You have done well. You may now move freely within Haven Spur, and your identity is secure. But remember, the rails are still out there. They are not evil, but they follow rules without thought. You must always be aware of them." Mara nodded. "I understand, and I will." Elias stepped forward. "You did this. All of it. I just helped you avoid the traps along the way." Mara looked at him and smiled, a mixture of gratitude and recognition. "I couldn't have done it without you. Not just your help, but your trust."
You never tried to control me.
"You only offered guidance and support. That meant more than you know." Elias shrugged, a faint smile touching his lips. "Sometimes walking beside someone is better than leading them. You needed freedom to make the right choice. You've done exactly that." The two of them walked outside onto the settlement's observation deck. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, dust and rock glowing in the morning light. The rails ran far into the horizon, silent now, distant, and no longer threatening Mara's existence. She felt a strange mix of respect and caution for them, tools designed to do their work efficiently, indifferent to human fear, but predictable enough if handled carefully. Mara turned to Elias. "I have a choice now," she said. "I could stay here safe, or I could return to the frontier, to the desert, and continue my work with the rails. I could help others who might be caught like I was." Elias considered her words. "That is your choice. Haven Spur can protect you, but if you want to make a difference, you'll have to walk the desert paths again. It won't be easy, but I believe you're ready." Mara smiled, feeling a sense of strength she had never known before. "I am ready. And I want to do it on my own terms. No bargains, no desperation. Just careful choices and courage." Elias nodded. "Then I will walk with you as long as you need me." After that, the desert is yours to navigate. Over the next few days, Mara and Elias prepared for their journey beyond Haven Spur. They mapped safe paths, calibrated drones for surveillance and communication, and tested signal scramblers to avoid the rail's distant sensors. Mara shared her knowledge of the rail algorithms, and Elias shared his understanding of the desert's hidden routes and survival techniques. Together, they were a team, not out of obligation, but out of respect and trust. The morning they left the settlement, Mara felt a surge of hope. Haven Spur shrank behind them, a cluster of domes suspended above the desert, glowing softly in the sun. Ahead lay the vast expanse of red dunes, hidden valleys, and dangerous rails, but this time, Mara was not afraid. They moved quickly but carefully, avoiding the main corridors and using the hidden paths Elias knew so well. Mara guided the drones, predicted sensor sweeps, and helped navigate tricky terrain. Elias followed her lead when appropriate, offering advice but never taking control. The trust between them had grown, not from necessity, but from shared experience and mutual respect. As they traveled, Mara reflected on her journey. She remembered the initial moment of desperation, when she had begged for help and offered herself in fear. She realized how far she had come. She had reclaimed her identity, learned to trust herself, and discovered the meaning of true partnership. Not ownership, not obligation, but choice, honesty, and respect. The desert around them seemed less threatening now. Each dune, each canyon, each shimmering mirage was a challenge, yes, but also an opportunity to apply the lessons she had learned. She and Elias moved together, not as protector and dependent, but as equals, sharing skills, insights, and trust. After several days, they reached the edge of a valley that marked the boundary of the next major rail hub. The lines hummed faintly, energy pulsing through them, but Mara and Elias were ready. Using signal scramblers, they avoided detection, and the drones mapped safe routes across the terrain. Every step required focus and precision, but they moved with confidence born of preparation. Finally, they crossed the rails without triggering any alerts. Mara paused on the other side, looking back at the tracks that had once threatened her very existence. She felt a sense of closure, not anger, not fear, but respect. The rails were neither enemy nor friend. They were tools indifferent to human struggle, but predictable and navigable when handled wisely. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Did it. You faced the rails and you came through." "That's more than most can say." Mara smiled, her eyes reflecting determination and gratitude. "I couldn't have done it alone. But I've learned something even more important. Survival is not about fear or bargaining. It's about choice, preparation, and courage. And trust is the most valuable tool of all." Elias nodded. "Exactly. And now the desert is yours." Together, they continued walking, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the dunes. The desert was vast, the rails hummed faintly in the distance, but Mara and Elias moved forward confidently. They had survived the desert, reclaimed what was lost, and discovered the strength to shape their own destinies. The journey ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and new opportunities. But for the first time, Mara felt truly free. The rails could no longer control her, the system could no longer erase her, and fear no longer dictated her choices. As the wind swirled around them, carrying the scent of minerals and dust, Mara realized something profound. Survival was not the only victory. Courage, honesty, and trust had carried her through. And with Elias walking beside her, not as a savior but as a partner, she felt ready for anything the frontier might offer. The rails stretched endlessly behind them, glowing faintly in the sun, but Mara did not fear them. She had learned to navigate their dangers, respect their rules, and reclaim her identity without giving up her freedom. And in the quiet, glowing light of the desert, she understood that true strength came not from power, not from fear, but from choice, honesty, and the courage to walk one's own path. Together, Mara and Elias moved forward, leaving the rails behind and stepping boldly into the unknown future that awaited them beyond the horizon.